Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Wire. My name is Indra Shekhar Singh, and today we're again bringing to you the discussion of Mandal 2.0. And to have this discussion, we have with us two very special guests. First, being Christophe Jaffrelot, who is a political analyst and has been commenting on the Mandal politics, the rise of Hindutva, and other very important political movements in India. The second guest is the founding editor of The Wire, MK Venu, and we're going to be trying to decode what is happening with Mandal 2.0. Is it a real alternative to the Hindutva politics and the communal politics that's taking place in India or rising in India? So, without wasting much time, I would like to pose the question to Professor Jaffrelot. How do you see this? How do you see this Mandal 2.0? Is there how have they reimagined it? What are your first comments on that?
Well, first of all, let me return to the point you've just made. There is indeed a dialectic between caste politics and Hindutva politics. And to a large extent, the rise of BJP in the 90s is a response to Mandal 1. And I distinguish Mandal 1 from Mandal 2. Mandal 2 will come, of course, in the early 2000s. But in reaction to the decision by VP Singh to expand quotas, you've seen so many dominant castes, Jats, Marathas, Patels, of course, shifting to BJP. And therefore, you have this polarization that helped BJP enormously in the 90s. Well, now we have a cycle that is starting again, a new cycle, as you say, a new Mandal politics. And we see the same dialectic in reaction to the hegemonic status that Hindutva has acquired. Caste is the main antidote. This is the only antidote to the kind of polarization, to the kind of Hindu vote bank politics that BJP has solidified. To divide this vote bank, caste is the solvent. And it may work for the simple reason that Hindutva politics is very conservative, socially, socioeconomically. It has increased inequalities amazingly, to an amazing proportion in India today. So caste can be certainly a very convincing counter-argument. Now, we may return to that. The main problem, of course, is caste unity within OBCs, within Dalits, but we will return to that, I'm sure, in the course of the conversation.
Yeah. So here I'd like to take the conversation to MK Venuji. And, this model has already been perfected in the South, where reservations and affirmative action given to backward castes in the South have resulted in a total reversal of social dynamics. And perhaps the non-penetration of the Hindutva politics into South India. Do you think that the re-engineering of society using affirmative action and government programs has actually been the bulwark against communal politics in the South?
Yeah, Indra Shekhar, we will discuss the South later. It is true that the South, going by what Jaffrelot just said, South Hindutva politics has not grabbed the imagination of the southern population. And the South, as we all know, has seen many states, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, they've seen social justice movements take roots, and social justice politics take roots, and both at the level of acquiring power and the level of organic bottom-up kind of growth in terms of social justice maturing there, politics of social justice. The South has done relatively much better. Therefore, Hindutva politics does not have much purchase in the South, except perhaps coastal Karnataka, some parts of Karnataka where there is no doubt majoritarian politics has some hold. But before that, I think we need to, Indra Shekhar, we need to just flesh out what the question that you began with. Mandal 1.0. Now, the problem is therefore, in my view, the problem is largely confined to North. It is in the North that Mandal 1.0, VP Singh's announcement, gave a big boost to Hindutva politics, as Chris just said. So, as he pointed out, the Patels and the Patels and the of Gujarat or Jats of UP, Haryana, they all gravitated towards BJP's Hindutva politics in the decade after the 90s. So that was a victory for in some sense the Hindutva politics really held sway, and caste politics, which as Jaffrelot says is an antidote, was actually pushed somewhat to the margin. Now the question is, Mandal 2.0, how will it pan out? So therefore, I would like to pose this question to everybody. I mean, to Jaffrelot, as to how the graded inequalities within castes, because that is important. How will that be addressed in Mandal 2.0? Because it was not addressed in 1.0. Mandal 1.0, because Mandal 1.0, in my view, I don't know whether Chris would agree with me, the caste politics became very instrumental. It became very power oriented, and therefore we had a phase where UP and Bihar saw Yadavs really sort of dominating power with the help of Muslim combination. Now that Yadav Muslim combination has run its course, it's got discredited. The other Ati Pichras, more backward castes have asserted themselves. Now, as it happens, the extremely backward or most backward castes in both UP and Bihar, they are more than a dozen of them, each one having 0.5 to 2% share in the population. So the real challenge is to how can you bring a dozen or more than a dozen castes, the caste combination from the backwards, from the more backward or most backwards.
Bring them together. Because I have very little time. Sorry. Do you want me to respond to this very important point? Yeah. In fact, I see two problems with Mandal 1, and unfortunately, I see one more problem with Mandal 2. The two problems with Mandal 1 were, as you say, divisions within OBCs. It was clear from day one almost that it would be very difficult to bring together Yadavs, Lodis, Gujars, Kirars, Kachis. The list is so long. It is such a fragmented block. So when you add an anti-Mandal movement, and that was very strong. Remember, when there were demonstrations in September 1990, when the Supreme Court suspended the Mandal decision, then there was a glue. There was enough reasons for closing ranks, and they created the Samta Party, they created the Samajwadi Party. But the moment they were in office, and that's the second problem, Yadav started to corner most of the benefits in Bihar and in Uttar Pradesh. And incidentally, the same problem occurred on the Dalit side, where Jatavs started to also corner most of the benefits. What is the result? The result is that division came back, and therefore you could, in fact, let BJP capture the non-dominant OBCs. And this is where they have been so good. You have all these non-dominant OBCs, including Lodis, by the way. And you have also non-dominant Dalits, including Balmikis and Katiks and others, following BJP today, because the dominant caste among the OBCs and among the Dalits have alienated them. So that's the number one and number two big problems. You have on the one hand divisions, you have on the other hand domination by some caste groups of the quotas. Now, today we have one more problem. And the other big problem that is emerging is the number of jobs under quotas is shrinking because the public sector is shrinking. So what do you want to distribute today? You have saturated the quota, 49%. You can't go beyond that. And you don't have jobs, as many jobs as you used to have to distribute. There were already few, by the way. They were not that great, but still, there were some jobs. The shrinking of the public sector makes this policy much more difficult. So I see only 2 or 3 avenues for this policy to fructify. One, you expand reservations to the private sector. Something that was talked about, remember, under Manmohan, and the CII and the FICCI were, well, thinking about it. That's one solution. 2, the Yadav-dominated parties become truly OBC parties, and it means that they have to give tickets, they have to nominate candidates from each and every caste, the way BJP does it, except that they don't nominate Yadavs, but they nominate candidates from all the castes. And they make sure that they let people from these small caste groups come up in the party hierarchy. They make them ministers. They really give them due respect. And third, you bring the class element in the conversation. Because...
But how?
Well, this is why the census needs to be somewhat sophisticated, more sophisticated. It's not only about caste, it has to be also about class. Because if you bring class in the picture, you show that there are poor people among Patels, there are poor people among Marathas, there are poor people among Jats, and they are losing out. Of course, you have an elite group, you have
the creamy layer.
You have a creamy layer. You have a creamy layer among the dominant caste. We think about the creamy layer among the OBCs, but there is you should expand this rationale of the creamy layer to dominant caste, because then you show that big dominant caste are so unequal. There is so much disparity. This is, by the way, what the Indian Human Development Survey shows. We have published recently with Kalai Arasan a fascinating article showing that, Dalits of the higher class in Maharashtra are richer than Marathas of the last decile.
Yeah.
That is a very important point to be made. And that when you bring back class in the conversation, then you make the block that BJP has constructed around dominant caste much more vulnerable. So these are the, I would say, avenues for the strategists.
So basically, So Chris, what you're saying is, if you don't do it scientifically, then it will be difficult for the non-Hindutva, the social justice alliance or non-Hindutva parties to wean away, as you said, many of the backward castes, people who are with the BJP who have joined the BJP in the last say 10-15 years post Mandal. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Well, you need data, and that's why the census is so important. Scientifically, yes, preferably scientifically, you do censuses based on caste and class, and there is a paucity of data in India today. The National Sample Survey is not doing its job anymore regarding poverty. The census has not been organized. So yes, at the state level, you have to do the right data collection. But then beyond that, or on the basis of that, you have to think creatively. You have to change. You can't redo the Mandal 1. You can't let Yadav prevail again. You can't let the dominant caste forming a bloc again. And you can't say, I'll give you reservations where there is no job. So you have to think, where would the jobs come from? You can also push for expanding beyond the 49% threshold. But, it's nothing compared to the private sector.
Do you think...
I'm just going to jump in. And the question is that, see, for example, after the Mandal 1, we saw that fixed caste identities, there was a social mobility within the castes, right? And we've seen that very clearly because there was caste consolidation of identity. And then because of the advantages that were given as part of the Mandal point one, there is a certain fracture within the conventional Varna system or the Hindu caste order, and not even just the Hindu caste order, the Muslim caste order, and the way castes function in society. So do you think finally that the reservations actually present a way to transform the caste society into somewhat of a class society? What is your view on that?
No, certainly we have a transformation of caste, I would say, from 2 points of view. One, you've had what I have called an ethnicization of caste. Caste used to be, remember, Kanchiram, you had this pen, and you had so it was presented as a hierarchy with Savarnas at the top and Baujan at the bottom. Well, now the caste system is much more horizontal. You have caste groups in competition for the spoils. This is what Mandal 1 has done. It has put a vertical system horizontally. So that's the first transformation. And the second transformation is because, as you say, of the economic transformation.
Mm-hmm.
You have class within caste. And therefore, you can't say, I'm a Maratha and therefore I am dominant. No, you can't say I'm dominant because I'm Maratha, because in my village, the Dalit has sent his boy to school and now he comes back as a civil servant and he can rule the village or the block. So we've seen this transformation because of reservations, by the way. This is something India is not sufficiently proud of. This positive discrimination policy has made a huge change in society. I think no other society has been transformed by positive discrimination the way the Indian society has been changed. We do have a Dalit elite, we do have a Dalit bourgeoisie, we do have Dalit intellectuals, and that's because of reservations. And that's why they are so much against it. So that was the first phase. That was really, as you can say, post-Nehru till Mandal 1 India. Now the second phase has to do with these new challenges that I have highlighted.
And Indra Shekhar, I want to come back to this, the question you raised about the South. Now, on the metric that Chris just outlined, I think the South has done relatively much better in the last 4-5 decades. What do you think, Chris? What do you how do you compare the Southern situation with North? Yeah.
This is another article we've done with Kalayyarasan that is absolutely fascinating also. The gap between the North and the South is widening in each and every respect. Mm-hmm. You can look at wages, wealth, education. Everywhere there is a growing divergence. And the South is really paying for the North now. Paying for the North in fiscal terms. And this is why the redelimitation may be a casus belli, because there is a limit to the kind of exploitation of the South that you can make. And if you undermine their political representation, that will be seen as, I would say, a casus belli. Now, there is one thing that is forgotten often. There are reservations for Muslims in the South.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It works, and it helps the Muslims the same way it has helped the Dalits in the north and elsewhere.
Telangana, I think. Yeah.
Karnataka, but also Kerala did it in the first place. So to think about reservations, to think about positive discrimination as a good policy for social cohesiveness, for social advancement, for development. Development is something India is forgetting about today. Development is not seen except in terms of growth rate. Growth is not development. Development is education and, of course, social cohesion. So, yes, there is a Dravidian model. This is clearly the lesson we are learning today. The model is there. Can we replicate that elsewhere? This is not the trend, but that can be Mandal 2.0 to some extent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the final question, I think we're almost out of time. And my final question to you is, if there is a reimagination, I'm sure there are problems with Mandal 2.0 and a 75% reservation. And like you said, you described the problems, but how can we reimagine it from your standpoint? And that's my last question. Binu, if you have something to add to that.
Yeah, Chris, but while you answer this question, Chris, I would make one small point. I remember in the late 80s when Kashiram, when we journalists would meet him, he used to give the example of the pen that you said, hierarchy, and he said the pen needs to be made horizontal. So, but has it become horizontal? You say it has become horizontal, but in the north, inequality still persists. Maybe in the south, class and caste politics have overlapped much more than in the north. I don't know what, Chris, what do you have to say to that? Yeah.
No, we've seen some change in the north as well. You know, there is no doubt that you have now, I repeat, a Dalit bourgeoisie, at least a Dalit middle class.
Yeah, okay.
BC middle class, you know, people who are educated, who have a good job. And this is because of this policy. Now, you ask about the creativity, the imagination.
The reimagination.
Yeah, you know, there is one thing that needs to be factored in. You can't let the same caste groups corner reservations generations after generations.
True. Yeah.
That's counterproductive. You know, if the son of a Jatav district magistrate has access to quota, you do something at the expense of those who are left out.
Mm.
So the idea of the creamy layer that has been appropriate, that has been applied to OBCs, probably should also apply to Dalits, and that's one. It's a way to reimagine the reservation policy. It's difficult, and it's very difficult for one simple reason. Even a Dalit who is in the middle class is victim of discrimination.
Yeah.
So if he loses his quota, he may return to square one in 2 generations.
Okay.
How do we prevent that from happening? You know, at the same time, we need to let newcomers to benefit from quotas at the expense of those who have already benefited from that. But those who are at the top may lose everything in 2 generations or even 1 generation. And the last point also I would like to make is it's not because you're an OBC politician benefiting from positive discrimination that you should not be taken care of in terms of corruption. You know, it's a difficult point to make, but what we've seen is, yes, there's a change in the social composition of the political class. We've seen the rise of OBCs in the north recently. Well, many of these OBC politicians happen to be as corrupt as the previous ones. You know, there is a change in the social composition of the assemblies. There is no change in the behavior of the politicians. Many of them are not peasants, but contractors. They are money-making machines. They do real estate. You know, it's not because you're an OBC politician that you're a plebeian. You're not necessarily seen as defending the plebeians. You're co-opted by a system where the elites exploit the rest. So OBC elites are not necessarily more helpful for the plebeians. And if we want to reimagine positive discrimination, we'll have to make sure that there is a solidarity between those who are supposed to speak for the poor. And that's, of course, something political parties only, and the judiciary to some extent, can take care of.
Okay. So thank you so much for that. And, you know, our time is almost up. But
viewers, sorry.
No, and so viewers,
one quick last question I want to ask, Chris. From your formulation just now, are you suggesting that Dalits should be treated on a separate footing as opposed to OBCs in terms of phasing out the elites. Are you suggesting that?
Well, there's still a difference, I would say, not in degree, but in kind between the two. And
Okay.
And that's something, of course, very discouraging, because untouchability is not going.
True. Yeah. That point is taken.
Friends, don't go anywhere. This program, this interesting conversation, Professor Jaffrelot just ended, but The Wire is bringing to you more programs very soon. And we will continue talking about the reservation politics, Mandal 2.0, and other issues of social justice. Thank you very much for watching.